What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a normal interview, only to be met with disrespect, condescension, and outright hostility from a host who clearly thinks she owns the room? It only took one comment about his career choices for the entire set to erupt into chaos, exposing a talk show host's true colors in front of millions of viewers. The morning started like any other on the Lorraine Kelly show. The studio audience settled into their seats. The cameras were positioned perfectly, and the production team buzzed around making final adjustments. Idris Elba was scheduled as the main guest, there to promote his latest film project. What should have been a straightforward, pleasant conversation was about to become one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Lorraine Kelly sat in her signature chair, wearing a bright floral dress that matched her overly cheerful demeanor. Beside her on the panel sat her regular co-hosts, Marcus, an entertainment journalist known for stirring up controversy, and Sophie, a lifestyle blogger who rarely challenged Lorraine on anything. The atmosphere seemed normal enough as the show's theme music faded, and Lorraine turned to the camera with her trademark smile. "Well, good morning, everyone," Lorraine began, her Scottish accent thick and her tone syrupy sweet. "We have a very special guest joining us this morning. He's an actor, a producer, and apparently someone who thinks he's too good for British television these days." The audience gave a confused smattering of applause. It was an odd way to introduce a guest, but Idris Elba walked out anyway, professional as always. He wore a simple navy blue suit, no tie, looking relaxed and ready for what he assumed would be a normal interview. He smiled at the audience, waved, and took his seat across from Lorraine. "Thanks for having me," Idris said warmly, settling into the chair. Lorraine leaned back, crossing her legs and eyeing him with an expression that can only be described as dismissive. "Oh, we're just so lucky you could make time for us little people," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I mean, Hollywood must keep you terribly busy." Idris's smile faltered slightly. He glanced at Marcus and Sophie, both of whom looked down at their notes, clearly uncomfortable already. "Well, I'm always happy to come back home and talk about the work," Idris replied diplomatically. "The work," Lorraine repeated, making air quotes with her fingers. "Yes, let's talk about the work. Your new film, it's another American production, isn't it? Another big budget spectacle where you play, what, the tough guy again?" The audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't the usual friendly banter. Marcus cleared his throat and tried to interject. "Actually, Lorraine, I think Idris has been doing some really diverse roles lately. The range he's shown is... I'm speaking..." "Marcus!" Lorraine cut him off sharply, not even looking in his direction. Her eyes remained fixed on Idris. "I'm just curious why someone with your talent keeps taking these, shall we say, formulaic roles?" Idris maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened slightly. "I choose projects that challenge me, and that I believe in," he said evenly. "Every role teaches me something new." "Does it, though?" Lorraine pressed, leaning forward now. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've forgotten where you came from. When was the last time you did a proper British drama? When was the last time you supported homegrown talent instead of running off to Los Angeles at every opportunity?" Sophie finally spoke up, her voice nervous. "Lorraine, maybe we should talk about the actual film. I think our viewers would love to hear about..." "Sophie, darling, I've got this," Lorraine interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I'm just asking the questions everyone's thinking. Idris here has become quite the Hollywood darling, haven't you? Too big for your britches, some might say." The air in the studio became thick with tension. Idris sat up straighter, his expression hardening. "I'm not sure what you're getting at, Lorraine," he said, his voice calm but with an edge. "I've never forgotten where I'm from. I work on projects all over the world, because that's what actors do." "What actors do?" Lorraine mocked, shaking her head. "Listen to yourself. You sound just like all those other sellouts who get a taste of fame and forget about the people who supported them from the beginning. Do you even remember doing British television? Or has that all been washed away by your fancy American lifestyle? Marcus tried again, clearly disturbed by where this was heading. Lorraine, I really think we should... Marcus, if you interrupt me one more time, you can leave the panel, Lorraine snapped, her pleasant facade completely gone now. She turned back to Idris. I'm just being honest here. Someone needs to say it. You've changed. You're not the same person who started out in this industry. You've let Hollywood corrupt you. Idris took a slow breath, visibly trying to keep his cool. With all due respect, Lorraine, you don't know me. You don't know my journey or what I've sacrificed to get where I am. I've worked incredibly hard. Oh, here we go, Lorraine interrupted, rolling her eyes dramatically. The hard work speech. Everyone in this industry works hard, Idris. That doesn't make you special. What makes you think you're so much better than everyone else? I never said I was better than anyone, Idris replied, his voice rising slightly. You're the one who's been attacking me since I sat down. I came here to have a conversation about my film, not to be insulted. Attacked? Lorraine laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the studio. Oh, you poor thing. Can't handle a little criticism? Is this... What happens when you spend too much time in Hollywood? You forget how to handle real questions from real journalists? Sophie looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. Marcus had gone pale, staring at his notes and clearly wishing he was anywhere else. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether this was planned or genuinely spiraling out of control. Real journalists ask informed questions, Idris said, his patience clearly wearing thin. They don't ambush their guests with personal attacks disguised as interview questions. What you're doing right now isn't journalism, Lorraine. It's just rude. Lorraine's face flushed red. Rude? You want to talk about rude? You show up here, to my show, with your Hollywood attitude, expecting everyone to bow down and worship you. Well, I'm not impressed. I've interviewed actual legends, people with real talent and humility. You're just another actor who got lucky. The studio gasped. Even the crew members visible in the background looked shocked. Marcus finally found his voice again. Lorraine, that's completely out of line. Idris is an incredibly accomplished... Shut it, Marcus! Lorraine barked. This is my show, and I'll run it however I see fit. If Mr. Hollywood here can't handle a proper interview, maybe he should go back to his cushy American talk shows, where they blow smoke up everyone's backsides. Idris stood up slowly, his tall frame towering over the seated panel. His face was calm, but his eyes showed the anger he was keeping carefully controlled. I think we're done here, he said quietly. Oh no, Lorraine said, standing up as well, pointing her finger at him. You don't get to walk out on me. You sit back down right now. You agreed to this interview, and you're going to finish it. I agreed to an interview, Idris said, his voice steady and firm. Not to be disrespected and insulted on national television. There's a difference, and clearly you don't understand that. Lorraine's face contorted with rage. How dare you? How dare you speak to me like that? I am the host of this show. I have been in this industry longer than you. You will show me respect. Respect is earned, Lorraine, Idris replied. And nothing about how you've conducted yourself this morning deserves any respect. You've been hostile, you've been dismissive, and you've made this entire conversation about tearing me down instead of having a genuine discussion. Sophie tentatively raised her hand like a schoolchild. Maybe we should just take a break and... Nobody asked you, Sophie, Lorraine shouted, not taking her eyes off Idris. This is between me and him. There is no between us, Idris said, already unclipping his microphone. I'm leaving. I don't need to sit here and be your punching bag just because you're having a bad day or because you've decided you don't like successful actors. Successful? Lorraine scoffed. You think you're successful? Let me tell you something about success. Success is building a career that lasts, not just jumping from one blockbuster to another, cashing checks, and forgetting where you came from. Success is staying true to your roots. My roots are just fine. Thank you, Idris said, his voice now showing clear irritation. My roots are in hard work, dedication, and treating people with respect, something you clearly know nothing about. Marcus stood up, trying to position himself between them. Look, everyone, let's just calm down for a second. We can... Sit down, Marcus! Lorraine screamed, her composure completely shattered. The veneer of the pleasant morning show host was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely unhinged. I am so sick of people telling me how to run my own show. Then maybe you should run it better, Idris said coldly. Because right now, you're embarrassing yourself, your panel, and everyone watching. The audience murmured in agreement. Several people could be heard saying, he's right, and this is terrible. Lorraine heard them and spun around to face the audience. Oh, so you're all on his side now? She demanded. After everything I've done for this show? After all the years I've entertained you people? Lorraine, please, Sophie whispered, reaching out to touch her arm. You're making this worse. Lorraine yanked her arm away. Don't touch me. You're all against me. All of you. This whole thing was supposed to be my moment to show him that he can't just waltz in here and expect special treatment. I never expected special treatment, Idris said, shaking his head in disbelief. I expected basic human decency. That's it. That's all any guest should expect when they come on a show. Well, you're not getting it, Lorraine shouted back. Not from me. Not today. You want to know why? Because I'm tired of actors like you thinking you're better than everyone. I'm tired of the arrogance, the entitlement, the way you all look down on television presenters like we're beneath you. I have never, not once, looked down on anyone in this industry, Idris said, his voice rising to match hers. But you know what? Right now, in this moment, I am looking down on you. Not because of what you do, but because of how you're acting. This is disgraceful. Lorraine stepped closer to him, her finger jabbing toward his chest. You don't get to judge me. You don't get to come into my house and tell me I'm disgraceful. Your house, Idris repeated, taking a step back. This isn't your house, Lorraine. This is a television studio. These people don't belong to you. This show doesn't give you the right to treat people however you want. I built this show, Lorraine shrieked. I made it what it is. Without me, there would be nothing. Marcus had his head in his hands. Sophie looked close to tears. The camera operators kept filming, unsure whether they should stop or keep going. The producers in the control room were presumably having a complete meltdown, but nobody came out to stop what was happening. You know what the saddest part about this is? Idris said, his voice dropping to a more measured tone. I actually used to respect you. I thought you were a good interviewer, someone who knew how to make guests feel comfortable and have interesting conversations. But this is just sad. You're so caught up in your own ego that you can't see how badly you're behaving. My ego? Lorraine laughed bitterly. That's rich coming from you. Mr. Big Shot movie star, you probably have an assistant whose only job is to tell you how wonderful you are. I don't, actually, Idris said. But even if I did, at least I wouldn't use my platform to belittle and attack people who come on my show in good faith. Good faith, Lorraine spat. You came on the show to promote your little movie and boost your profile. Don't pretend you were doing us some kind of favor. And you invited me on to humiliate me, Idris countered. That's what this was always about, wasn't it? You wanted to take me down a peg. You wanted to create drama. Well, congratulations, Lorraine. You've created drama. You've also destroyed any credibility you had left. Lorraine's eyes narrowed. Get out, she hissed. Get out of my studio right now. I was already leaving, Idris said, completely calm now. He looked at Marcus and Sophie. I'm sorry you both had to witness this. You seem like decent people stuck in a really difficult situation. Marcus nodded slightly, not daring to speak. Sophie managed a small, sad smile. Idris turned back to Lorraine one last time. You should really think about why you felt the need to do this today. Because whatever your problem is, it's not with me. It's with yourself. And until you figure that out, you're going to keep alienating people and burning bridges. I don't need advice from you, Lorraine snapped. Just leave. Get out. You're kicked off my show. Do you hear me? You're banned. You'll never set foot in this studio again. Trust me, Idris said, walking toward the exit. That's not the threat you think it is. Lorraine called after him, her voice shrill and desperate. You think you're so perfect, don't you? You think you're above all this? Well, you're not. You're just another actor who'll be forgotten in 5 years. Idris paused at the edge of the stage, turned back one more time, and simply said, Goodbye, Lorraine. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. And with that, he walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or sit in shocked silence. Most chose silence. Lorraine stood there, breathing heavily, her hair slightly disheveled, her makeup running from the tears of rage that had started streaming down her face. Marcus and Sophie remained frozen in their seats, staring at nothing in particular. Well, Lorraine finally said, turning to the cameras with a forced smile that looked more like a grimace. I suppose that's what happens when people can't handle honest questions. We'll be right back after this break. But the damage was done. The cameras had captured everything. The audience had seen everything. And as Idris Elba walked out of that studio with his dignity intact, it was clear to everyone watching who the real professional was and who had completely lost the plot. Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Lorraine, what just happened? What happened, Lorraine said, still trying to maintain some composure, is that I asked difficult questions and he couldn't handle it. That's all. That's the whole story. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't true. Everyone knew it wasn't true. Sophie looked at her with something resembling pity, which somehow made everything worse. Maybe we should actually take that break, Sophie suggested gently. Fine, Lorraine said curtly. Take a break. Take all the breaks you want. I need to speak with my producers. She stormed off the set, leaving Marcus and Sophie sitting there in the wreckage of what should have been a simple morning interview. The studio audience began to murmur among themselves, phones already out, presumably texting friends and family about what they'd just witnessed. In the hallway outside the studio, Idris was removing the last of his microphone equipment when a young production assistant approached him nervously. Mr. Elba, she said quietly, I just wanted to say I'm so sorry about what happened in there. That was completely unprofessional, and you handled it with so much grace. Idris gave her a tired smile. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not your fault. I know, but still, she continued. We've never seen her like that. I mean, she can be difficult sometimes, but that was something else. Everyone has bad days, Idris said diplomatically, even though he clearly didn't believe Lorraine's behavior could be excused as just a bad day. That was more than a bad day, the assistant said. That was cruel, and everything you said to her was right. You were nothing but professional when you arrived. She just went after you for no reason. Idris nodded, not wanting to speak badly about Lorraine to her own staff, even though she certainly deserved it. Well, it's over now. I'm just going to head out. Of course, the assistant said. Again, I'm really sorry. I hope this doesn't sour you on all British television. It won't, Idris assured her. One person doesn't represent an entire industry. Back in the studio, the break was ending, and Lorraine was being briefed by a very stressed-looking producer who kept wiping sweat from his forehead. Lorraine, we need to address what just happened, the producer said urgently. We don't need to address anything, Lorraine insisted. He walked out. That's on him, not me. Lorraine, you attacked him from the moment he sat down, the producer said, exasperated. The entire country just watched you verbally assault one of Britain's most beloved actors. We need damage control." "Damage control?" Lorraine's voice rose again. "I was doing my job. I was asking tough questions." "Those weren't tough questions," the producer said bluntly. "Those were personal attacks. There's a difference, and you know it." Marcus and Sophie were still on the panel, listening to this exchange with wide eyes. They'd never heard anyone speak to Lorraine this way, but apparently even the producers had reached their limit. "I think," Marcus ventured carefully, "that maybe when we come back from break, we should acknowledge what happened. And—" "We're not acknowledging anything," Lorraine cut him off. "We're going to move on to the next segment like nothing happened." "Lorraine, that's not going to work," the producer said firmly. "People aren't stupid. They saw what they saw. Pretending it didn't happen will only make things worse." "Fine," Lorraine said through gritted teeth. "What do you want me to say?" "Maybe just," Sophie offered timidly, "maybe just say that things got heated and you regret how the interview went." Lorraine glared at her. "I'm not apologizing." "Nobody said you have to apologize," the producer said, though his tone suggested he thought she absolutely should. "Just acknowledge it and move forward." The cameras came back on. The audience looked tense, waiting to see what would happen next. Lorraine sat in her chair, straightened her dress, and looked directly at the camera. "Well," she began, her voice tight, "as you all just saw, my interview with Idris Elba took an unexpected turn. Sometimes in this business, conversations get passionate. We at the Lorraine Kelly Show pride ourselves on asking the questions other shows won't ask. Now, let's move on to our cooking segment." It was the most non-apology anyone had ever heard. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, knowing this wasn't going to blow over. Sophie bit her lip, staying silent. The cooking segment proceeded with forced cheerfulness, but everyone in the studio could feel the tension. Lorraine's smile looked painted on. Her laughter sounded hollow. Every few minutes, someone in the audience would whisper something, and Lorraine's eyes would dart in their direction, paranoid and defensive. When the show finally ended, Lorraine didn't stick around for the usual post-show pleasantries. She grabbed her things and headed straight for her dressing room, slamming the door behind her. Marcus and Sophie exchanged glances. "That was the most uncomfortable hour of my life," Marcus said quietly. "Do you think she'll be okay?" Sophie asked. "I think she just made a massive mistake," Marcus replied, "and I don't think she realizes how big. Yet." Meanwhile, Idris had already left the building. He sat in the car taking him back to his hotel, looking out the window at the London streets passing by. His phone was buzzing constantly, messages from his team asking what happened, but he ignored them for now. He needed a moment to process what had just occurred. He'd been in this industry long enough to know that sometimes interviews went badly. He'd dealt with difficult journalists before, people who asked provocative questions or tried to get a rise out of him. But what happened with Lorraine was different. That wasn't journalism. That wasn't even entertainment. That was just mean-spirited and petty. The thing that bothered him most wasn't even the things she'd said about him. He'd heard worse over the years. What bothered him was the precedent it set. If hosts like Lorraine could get away with treating guests that way, what did that mean for other actors, especially younger ones who might not have the confidence to stand up for themselves? He thought about all the times he'd seen interviewers take advantage of their position, using their platform to make guests uncomfortable for ratings or clicks. He'd always tried to handle those situations with grace, but today he'd reached his limit, and he didn't regret walking out, not even a little bit. Back at the studio, the staff was in crisis mode. The switchboard was lighting up with calls. Social media was exploding. Everyone had an opinion about what had just happened, and the vast majority were siding with Idris. The producer found Marcus and Sophie in the green room. "We need to talk about the show going forward," he said seriously. "What do you mean?" Sophie asked nervously. "I mean that was a disaster, and we need to figure out how to recover from it," the producer explained. "Lorraine's behavior today was unacceptable. We've already had 3 advertisers call expressing concerns. Marcus nodded slowly. She's not going to take criticism well. She's going to have to, the producer said, because if she doesn't change her approach, there might not be a show to host. In her dressing room, Lorraine sat staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes were red, and for the first time in a long time, she looked tired. Really tired. Deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew she'd made a terrible mistake. She knew she'd let her own insecurities and frustrations take over. She knew that Idris Elba had done nothing to deserve the way she'd treated him, but admitting that would mean admitting she was wrong. And Lorraine Kelly had built an entire career on being right, on being the one in control, on being the authority. Admitting weakness now felt impossible. So instead, she convinced herself that she'd done nothing wrong, that Idris was too sensitive, that people were overreacting, that tomorrow everyone would forget about it and move on. She was wrong about that. 2. The moment Idris Elba walked off that set, off that show, away from that hostile environment, he reclaimed his dignity. He showed millions of viewers what it looked like to stand up for yourself with grace and composure. He demonstrated that success doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that fame doesn't obligate you to endure disrespect. And Lorraine Kelly? She showed everyone exactly who she was when the cameras were rolling and the mask slipped off.